Sometimes people use the words mentoring and coaching interchangeably, but they don't describe the same type of working relationship. Both share team and organizational goals, including learning and development that leads to peak performance and the realization of full potential. However, the definition, focus, role, approach, and tools of each are different. And in today's episode, this is what we're going to be discussing. Can a coach be a mentor? Is there a difference between the roles? What attributes should a good mentor possess? Is there anything you should be aware of in these roles? How does mentoring help the athletes? And finally, what could be the difference between an athlete who is mentored compared to one who isn't? Once again, ladies and gentlemen, I have my co-hosts on, Sean Jenkins and Leland Johnson. So I want to start with you, Sean. Explain the difference between a mentor and a coach.
Okay, well, the difference between the two, although as you mentioned earlier that there sometimes people use them interchangeably, and there are some instances where they are closely related. But for a mentor, the mentor, what the relationship is between that and the athlete, there's a partnership. So there's a mutual learning for the mentor as well as the athlete, or the coach as well as the athlete, where each is learning from one another, with the emphasis being on the athlete. What's best for the athlete, how can they better serve the athlete to be able to, whether it be to be a better athlete, a better student, a better person, going through life. Whereas the coach is more of a authoritative figure, and this person suggests in this aspect, they suggest a goal for the learner, whereas a mentor looks at what the athlete is doing and they make the adjustment based on the athlete. But the coach suggests, what is best for the athlete and how, working with the athlete can better suit either the coach's program and the team. So one is athlete focused, whereas the other one is more focused on what the coach wants for the betterment of his program and how the athlete fits in there.
I agree, but I think in today's environment, you kind of fuse the two. If you want to be good at what you're doing, you will have to fuse the two. You'll have to have a relationship with your athletes in order to get the best out of them. I don't know any situations right now where a kid has a coach and then he has a mentor, as as the titles would describe them. But I tend to think that it's something that coaches or mentors have to be. I think a mentor has to be a little bit of a coach and understand what the coach wants, understand what the coach's system is about. Also, he should have a great relationship, or try to have a relationship with the coach, so that there's no adversarial situations jumping off where you're getting information from your mentor that might cross the information with your coach. So this is a very interesting topic. It's a very interesting topic for me because I think I've approached it more so from without even knowing, more from a mentor position than a coach when I work with my kids.
I didn't get better with athletes until I started adding like the mentorship component to my program. And I go back and allude to some of the things that you said earlier. That is what makes us different from the average personal trainer. It's what makes us different from the average strength coach. It's what makes us different from the average sports performance specialist, or sports performance coach, because most people are just there to train the athlete and then they go home. Most coaches are just there to get out on the field and do the skills work and go home. But what I found is when you really make a difference is when you start considering the athlete's feelings, where you can sympathize, where you can empathize, where you can let them know about your mistakes that you've made, your successes, and build like a deeper relationship because you show that you care about them, where you get to know them outside of the field, court, diamond, or track.
That's very much true. That's very much true. And I think probably one of my advantages was when because I had two I can kind of say two different situations where I got involved with coaching and basketball when I became a basketball trainer and coach. I had a situation that I started before my son was born, and there was a situation because I had to go off play ball, and then I came back. And when he was born, I had to start thinking about our life together and things I wanted to do with him. So I think that approach with him kind of led me to approach it in that way with others. So I think that's why when I say that I think I approached it from the mentorship avenue first. I think that's the reason why I did it. It wasn't something that was intentional. It was something just because of, we're creatures of habit. So it was a habit of dealing with jazz in a certain way. So I felt like I should give other kids, the same quality of teaching and coaching.
Yes, and for me personally, when I was growing up playing sports, getting into high school and college, and then later playing semi-pro, I didn't have anybody who had been through that field of landmines before, where you might have distractions. You're dealing with peer pressure and learning how to stay on the right path, where I made several mistakes, doing the drinking, doing the partying, playing around with recreational drugs, cheating on exams and things like that. And basically having, a disregard, to discipline. And as I look back on it, it's something that I wanted to add to my program. So the kids that I'm working with and that I was working with in the past, they would not make those same mistakes, and I feel like often sometimes collectively as us as coaches, we want to be perfect. We want to say, don't do this, don't do that, but we fail to explain the hows and the whys, and going forward with this topic, I wanted to ask you, Sean, what attributes should a good mentor possess?
Let me, I want to step back a little bit. I want to add to that, the previous discussion. And what I wanted to say was, if, combining the two, coach and mentor, for some it's a balancing act. But if a coach can, because the coach is going to be a coach first, but if they can really get the mentoring piece in there, that it's really beneficial, because and us as strength coaches, we're the ones who are in contact with the athletes, every athlete, or every position, for instance, on a football team. But if we are connecting with that athlete, showing them we care about them, that gets them the buy-in to whatever your program you want to implement. And also, when you're able to address some issues that they're having outside of athletics, uh, and get them to talk about it, or be able to have someone to go to. And if you can address that issue, a lot of times that helps them become a better athlete, because that's one less thing they have to worry about. So it's very important that that whoever a coach does, take some of these attributes and implement it into their framework. But getting back to the question, an attribute a mentor has that a good mentor would have, uh, you want to build a capability. So you want to make sure that you're emphasizing, or you're impacting that athlete, or you're making them more capable, maybe taking more ownership on some of the things they do, getting to that next level, pushing through barriers. You're helping them discover themselves. You're not really giving them, this is what you need to do, but by working with them and helping them see things, they're kind of discovering along the way through their own process, and it can help them work toward self-reliance and accomplishing goals. Again, a mentor is not is an authoritative figure over the mentor. It's just like you're just guiding them, or you helping them, or you giving them tools to guide themselves and navigate the road which they want to go down. And you have to be centered on the goals of the athlete. So it is not our goals. We are there to help them accomplish their goals. And this next one, uh, both a coach and a mentor can actually have, which is listening, sharing experiences, obviously developing the athlete, having some insight on some of the things that they're dealing with, and letting them know you may have gone through it as well. But sometimes all you have to do is just be that person there that just wants to, is just there as a sounding board.
Mhm.
That's just there to listen. Sometimes athletes want to vent. For instance, in my job, I'm on the ombuds. I'm an ombuds, and so it's like employee relations. So a person will come to me if they're having an issue about management, and for the most part, not a lot of the people just want to vent. They just want somebody to hear them, and many times I don't even, give them any options. I feel better now that I had somebody to talk to, somebody subjective that's not going to say anything to me or belittle me. They just want to talk. And so for an athlete, maybe that may be something that they just need to do. They just need someone to talk to. So go ahead.
No, yeah, you hit the point on the nose because Deshaun and I have an athlete, India Fly, who was at New Mexico, and she was actually newcomer of the year, in the conference, all made all conference her first year. She all those accomplishments you would want to have as a freshman, she had those, but walked away from the situation, or didn't walk away yet, but she's wanting to walk away from the situation because of some of the things that were, some of the interactions with her and her head coach. And I had some advice for her. And, I know there's some things I would like for her to do, but you have to allow the athlete to kind of run through their own little mental processes and allow them to make the choice. As a mentor or coach, you can't pressure them too much on what you would do or what you would like to do. You have to let them make the decision and be there to support it. Find a way that, in any way possible. Her situation is she has some of the biggest schools across the nation, St. John's, some of the best women programs that are out there, Florida, very, very good programs, probably about 10 to 15 schools right now. But her desire is to go back to junior college. And there's reasoning behind it. And, as a mentor, I can understand. As a competitor, I probably couldn't. She wants to go back to junior college because she feels that the rigors of Division I basketball is a little too much for her, and some of the treatment she got from her coach was kind of negative. So she left with this. I left her, or she went back to school. I think she's going to make the decision to go back to junior college. But I had to be there, like you said, Sean, as a sounding board for her to vent, because at one point she was like, "Well, won't you talk to the coaches?" Then she pulled back and wasn't sure about it. So that's when I just let her go through her own little mental processes and let her figure it out.
Yeah, I like what both of y'all are saying. And I think sometimes us as coaches, we put too much of our own expectations on athletes, or sometimes we don't consider their feelings. And going back to what you were discussing before, Sean, as far as attributes, I think a mentor is definitely going to have the attributes of understanding emotional intelligence. A mentor is going to have another attribute of understanding social intelligence, because if you can understand your own feelings and then go into how another individual or a young person might be feeling, like you said, Leland, we have to understand what they're going through. And I think too often us as coaches on the coaching side collectively, because me and Leland, we've done both. And I know, Leland, you're still doing both. As a coaches collectively, sometimes we don't care, or we don't adjust to an athlete's feelings, especially if it's like you have large numbers on a team. But definitely understanding a young person's emotions and where they might be coming from, taking the time to do that and realizing what's going on in their brain, such as their amygdala, their the left and the right prefrontal cortex. So it gets kind of deep. And that's why us as coaches, we're ever evolving. You have to constantly do research. I mean, I have to have mentors. I'm learning from y'all, to keep this thing going, to get better, because society is always changing in the ways that we choose to treat people.
Yeah, let me add something to that. That was a nice topic you brought up, bro. As we have to, as mentors, we have to again, we have to be there as a sounding board. We got to be there as a sounding board. We got to be there as someone that wants to help. But we got to, like you said, it's a fine line between doing what you want to do and doing what they want to do. So yeah, man, that's I always found that interesting in you and I that we had that ability to do that. And one thing I was going to add is I think that every good coach should not allow himself when he gravitates or when he sees that okay, now I'm ready for high school students or I'm ready to start working with college students. I think coaches should take a step back, start working with younger kids all over again after you work with older kids. It's like doing research in any business or any profession you do. Sometimes you're gonna have to take a step back and relearn some things that you kind of forgot. I think with some coaches, I feel with some coaches, the method of taking steps back and start working with, continue to work with younger kids, so you're in tune with the generations and the way they perceive things. That is a very, 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 very good tool to use. That very few coaches attempt to use.
And I'll add is it's not to coach bash. It's just us getting and going back to learning about what the youth are going through today, connecting with the youth today and understanding, like you said before, their mental processes. In terms of mentoring and coaching, I want to ask you this, Sean. Is there anything that we should be aware of in these roles?
Well, the coach, I mean, this is where it's important to know your athlete because you're dealing with different athletes. They all have different learning processes. You can't interact with the same way with every athlete, so you have to know, what is the best method to get through to the athlete. And so this is when you have to be aware of, you know, when to be in the coaching role, when that should be emphasized more than a mentor role, and how to approach the athlete. It's not it's not where you are um, placating to the athlete and just giving up everything for the betterment of your program, but it's just how you're going to reach that athlete. So us, I'm gonna say us being the more mature individuals, we just have to use that process on how to better reach the athlete. So in the long run, we can get our point across and help them to, to better themselves, and at the same time prepare them for what we're trying to do. So the thing we have to be aware of is when to push that button, when to emphasize the coaching role over the mentoring role, and that would help, because sometimes if you stick to one side more than the other, then you may lose them. Whereas if you can just
Yeah,
gravitate, and it takes a skill. It's not for everyone, and sometimes we're going to falter. But the more we interact with these athletes, uh, that skill set starts to doesn't deviate as much. You become more of a master at it, and it's really, really important, especially when you're dealing with different genders.
hmm
Because we're different. Men are men and women are women. So it's very important that you learn, how to communicate, what makes them better understand the goal that you're trying to set. Or you may not even want to have a goal. You may want to make them, I guess you could say, think that they're in charge by the way you approach them, but at the same time you're getting the result that's going to benefit the athlete and the goals, or what you're trying to accomplish, whether in the weight room or on the field or the court.
yeah. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to be vulnerable.
Yeah, you can't act like you know it all and that you've been there and you've never faced anything. And like you said, Leland, by being vulnerable, you're showing your human side. You letting them in to your world, letting them know, hey, I struggle with that, and then they'll part. And like you said before, they're like, oh, okay, so what I'm feeling is not abnormal. I'm actually a normal person. If Coach has
Yep.
experienced this and felt this way, and then he or she took these steps to help themselves out of it, then that relieves the athlete and that helps them along. So you're definitely right when you saying be vulnerable, because if you're not, then you lose it. You lose the athlete.
Yeah, I was going to say a coach or mentor should also be aware of the power that comes with getting to know the student athlete's parents or guardians, because when you take the time to do that in an authentic way, where you really get to know their parents or their guardians, you can understand that athlete better. And especially in understanding what's going on in their life, they could be training with the team. They could be training with the outside entity, like any one of us on here, because we do strength and conditioning training. They could be taking advanced classes and doing any other getting outside help or working with the tutor. So they have a busy schedule. So that might not allow for a huge social life. And then that social life might come out in the classroom of them getting reprimanded for horseplaying. So it like y'all said before, it might not always be we should discipline a person. More so, it should be about understanding what they're going through at the time and then learning how to make adjustments so that athlete does have some free time. They do have some recovery time. But I feel that it's really important for the coach and mentor to get to know an athlete's parents in an authentic way, and not something that's kind of just glossed over where it's just cursory conversations when they meet up.
That's important, Deshaun. That's so important because the parent is actually, I like to say, that's the kid's second brain. I have a situation with a kid that's a fourth grader that's on my fifth grade team, and all year he's been a underachiever. Not say underachiever, he's just physically he's not there yet. So there's a process he's going to have to go through, and the kid kind of gets it. The mom kind of gets it. She looks at her son and sees that he's a little awkward, a little babyish at this time, and she knows that years and maturity is going to take care of that. But now the dad, on the other hand, is different. He's more into why is my son playing more, and yeah, we're more competitive, but can he be put in this situation? And and I'm consistently battling with him. Not consistently, but the question I have to ask him is, should I shut down the process, slow it down for everybody to bring your son up, or do we continue to keep him in a situation that he's basically happy with, but you're struggling with because he's a little immature at this particular time? So yeah, you gonna have those conversations, and you're gonna to have those conversations with parents, especially in the world today. You can't avoid it. You can't avoid it. Maybe when my son was younger, you could lay down a rule and parents aren't going to question you. Because of the popularity of sports now, and the Stephon Curry rage, and every kid now feels like I can do it. Um, Parents think their kids have the right to do it. So you got to be, you have to be, you know, you have to have that relationship with the parents, or you're gonna be dealing with huge problems, a bunch of huge problems down the road.
I'll add on to that, Leland, because sometimes you know, I've seen parents and you've seen them. Your fourth grader isn't going to all of a sudden act like a 16-year-old. And sometimes we can't act, and we can't expect a 14-year-old to act like a 22-year-old that's already in college. There's just, their brain is still developing. So we have to let them mature. We have to let them learn how to mature, and when we try to force that, I think that oftentimes it puts more stress on the student athlete's plate, and they're probably going to be more likely to cheat on an exam, more likely to skip out of practice, or just not want to be there, versus letting them relax. And like you said, maybe sometimes you have to pull back and put them in places where they can get some easy wins to build confidence to want to do more on their own.
That's the boxing theory. I often use that, where you take a boxer, he's a good boxer, and say his attribute is he can box, but he can't punch, or you don't know if he can take a punch. Well, you set up situations for him to fight against those inferior fighters to build up confidence, and as he goes, you may change the attribute of the opponent a little bit. You may bring in a guy who can punch a but not that much. You may bring in a guy with a weak chin that can punch, but with no boxing, no defensive skills. So you got to play chess with it, mix and match, and play little bitty games like that in order to build up confidence. Like I used to tell Jazz, the most precious thing you have is your confidence. Once you lose it, you're done. And that goes for any level.
How does mentoring help the athletes?
Being the mentor aspect of the athlete, it actually puts the onus, I guess you could say, on the athlete. It helps the athlete, as I emphasized earlier, you building a capability in the athlete to make certain decisions, to think things out, to see how they should navigate certain situations, how they where you're not developing a robot. Don't do this, don't do that. Where you're the one just telling them how they should act all the time, and just being like this, I guess you could say, this Papa Bear over them, where you're not allowing them to think through things, but at the same time, you still want to step in when you see them go sideways. For instance, I mean, how many, and I do know that a lot of these athletes that are getting in trouble are, they have, lack someone that's taking a mentorship role. And sometimes when these guys are their mentors, they're mentor in name only, but not, they don't emphasize these attributes of a true mentor, because sometimes in the end, you kind of see that mentor, and I'm using air quotations, that mentor has an agenda. It has, they really kind of want to elevate, themselves or whatever thing that they're in, and they're kind of using this athlete. Whereas you want to make sure you're about that athlete, doing better. Uh, and so when you remove, so a mentor's job is to put things into the athlete, so that when you're not around, hopefully that they will remember those things in certain situations, and see something that may not be correct for them, and avoid it. Whereas if they didn't have that mentor, they may jump in there. They may allow peer pressure to overtake them, and next thing you know, they're in trouble. Because when they go to that next level, they're gonna have more money, more opportunities, to maybe get in some trouble. Whereas uh, if they didn't have that guidance, or if they had that guidance, they may be able to avoid those things. So the mentor is just basically helping that person think for themselves, even though in a certain aspect you're still guiding them, but they're the ones that are leading it, and you're basically, you're behind them as they're walking down that path. Whereas a coach, you're out in front and you're dragging them along. So you're saying, and you're protecting them from everything. Whereas a mentor would say, okay, how did you deal with that? And then the athlete may say, well, I dealt with it this way. One, you can say, how have you considered handling it this way? Where you're not telling them you should have done this, but you saying, have you considered, have you thought about it? So you giving them, you're making it like they're the ones who are coming up with this, and then hopefully down the road they'll use this experience, um, to avoid some pitfalls and make better decisions. But the biggest thing is also, that I mentioned earlier, is that as a mentor, and hopefully with the impact you've had on this athlete's life, that they'll be able to come back and talk to you when something's, puzzling them, or when they're having an issue, and you just, again, being that sounding board, listening, sharing, giving insight. So, mentoring is very important. We see it all the time with my fraternity. We have a mentoring program. Our kids, they graduate from the program. We have one just went to the military. Now he's back, and he's plugged in with the younger kids now. And so he's giving back, and he's sharing his experience. Just the other day, one of my athletes that where I was a strength coach and athletic trainer at high school, I saw him on Facebook. Now, when this kid was in high school, we didn't know which way he was going to go. I mean, he had a rough upbringing, but he did it. He did his thing. He got out of high school, got to work. And now he's raising his family. He just moved, and he posted a picture of his beautiful family, man, and it warmed my heart. And I told him, I said, man, I'm proud of you. I was like, you did what you had to do. And he responded, he goes, thanks to men like you, coach, I was able to do that. And I was like, wow, I had no idea of the impact that I played. But I mean, that made my day. So it's very gratifying when, when you can get that type of feedback from this guy. And we knew he wasn't going to go to that next level. You just want to help him, be the best person he can. And so far, he's done his thing, man. And I'm very proud of him.
Well, yesterday I had a situation with Coyote, who's over at Boise State. And yesterday I'm talking to him on the phone, and he goes, yeah, there was I think the coaches are tripping on me a little bit. I said, what are you talking about? He said, yeah, well, he pulled me into the office and he was having a conversation with me and, just kind of like shooting the shit with me. I said, well, what do you mean just shooting the shit with you? He's like, he just cutting it up with me. So as we got more in depth into the conversation, the coach basically pulled him in the office to find out, hey, what's going on with you? Because one day you're doing this and then the next day you're doing this, right? So the coach got to a line of questioning, and he was like, as I'm listening to him telling me the interaction between him and the coach, I stop him when the coach says, well, when we were running gassers, why weren't you running hard, right? So I stopped and I said, wait. I said, why would he ask you that question? He said, well, my knee had been bothering me all day. And I was telling him I'm going to take it easy in this situation and take it easy. I said, well, did you clarify that with the coach before, hours before you came to practice? No. I said, okay. I said, first of all, let me let you know how I view this. I said, on the gassers, what was the requirements? He said, well, the requirements was we had to be from one point to the other point in 10 seconds. And I think he was getting mad at me because the other guys were making it in 8 seconds. I said, whoa. I said, so what's the problem? He said, I know, man. I was making it. I said, wait. I said, so you let the coach tell you could do something in 10 seconds. The other guys were doing it in 8 seconds, and you thought that was cool? So he got quiet. I said, do you or do you not have a year of this program under your belt? He says, yes, I do. I said, well, you're not setting a good example, bro. What you showing the coach is that you'll play when you want to play, and when you don't want to play, you won't play. And what he's looking for is consistency. Now, I explained that to him, but in order to explain that to him, I needed to have maturity, I needed to have the experience, and I needed to have knowledge of Division I coaches and sometimes how they see certain things. When you have those qualities and you have that those things sitting before you, that's so important to a young athlete. How many times have you sat back as a young athlete and said to yourself, wow, if I had the maturity and the knowledge of a 40-year-old cat when I was doing this at 20, I'd be on the professional level. Probably a million, because I've done it a million times. You know what I'm saying? So basically what you are, you're that mature brain inside of their mind. If you have a great relationship with the kid like I have with Coyote, you could be jackass honest. You can just say, hey, this is what the situation is. This is how the coach is perceiving it. Either you do it or you accept what's going to come to you. With a kid like that, he goes, okay, cool. I mean, let me make my adjustments. So that's how important a mentor can be.
Yeah, Leland, and like you said, and Sean, you expressed it earlier. At the end of the day, the mentors help athletes because the athletes feel loved. They feel cared for. And when they feel like you love them and you care for them, they will call you and they will talk about difficult topics. Whereas if a person didn't have a mentor, he probably wouldn't even have made that call. And again, that's the importance of a mentor or a coach like yourself having the emotional and social intelligence to look at a situation and tell him and explain it to him where he thought he probably wasn't doing anything wrong, but then you had to break it down to him and give it to him in detail. But at the end of the day, it comes back to how we communicate with ourselves and how we communicate with others. And there's a difference between the two, but they have to be synergized. And it helps when the mentor or coach knows himself and knows how he might respond or react to an emotional situation, because that could have went the opposite way. And I'm sure he's going to be better off, because you were able to give him that knowledge, wisdom, and experience that you already have. And sometimes the difference in mentors is you might not get that from a coach, or he might not know how to go talk to that coach. Nevertheless, as we get into the fourth quarter, what could be the difference between an athlete who is mentored compared to one who isn't?
Well, the difference, and I know, we keep saying this, but it's important, is to have that individual who's a sounding board, the one that you can go to, that you can't go to your homeboys or your teammates, that's going to give you some, I guess, a listening ear, and a sort of an objective listening ear, and who's going to give you some sound advice, or give you a scenario that's going to help you make the decision because they know you very well. Whereas one who isn't mentored, for instance, the example you gave, Lee. So if that young man didn't have you to go and talk to, like Deshaun said, he may think, "Hey, man, coach is tripping." I beat it under 10 seconds. Well then, so why is he on me? And I'm doing what I need to do. But then, as you as a mentor, you gave him a scenario. Say, wait a minute, you've been in this program. These guys are doing under 8. So you, as as the one who's been here, you should be doing. So it's things like that that can help him. So now that's going to help him immensely. He's going to go forward and he's going to think about that. He goes, yeah, I have to be the example. So that is a great example of someone who's mentored. Because if you look at it from the coaching standpoint, see, the coach was asking him a question and he was thinking the coach is coming down. The coach is asking him all these questions. Whereas you helped him, see what was going on. So that's a mentor's job, and it was like a little give and take. You weren't overbearing on him, saying you need to do. It wasn't slamming him like some coaches may do. That just may be their method, and they're not even, within that mentor emphasis, where it's a partnership. So what you guys are doing was maybe a partnership, although you are you are the I guess I won't say authoritative, but you are the senior figure there that's helping this young man. When we mentor these young men, or when we use that mentoring role, it's helping them make the right decisions. It's making them, or I won't say making them, it's helping them come up with the processes to develop, to make the right decisions, to stay away from things, to have someone in their corner. Because if you go to the next level, people are just going to want to be around you for who you are and what you can give them. But if you're not asking anything from them, but you just want their best interest at heart, that's huge. And they know they could depend on that their money means nothing, that you care about them genuinely as a person. And that's going to go a long ways compared to somebody who just wants to be around them because they're an athlete or what you can give them. So yeah, mentor, you're helping them athletically, but the grand scheme is you helping them through life. And they're going to be a non-athlete longer than they are going to be an athlete, because we know the lifespan of an athletic career is very short when you compare it to life in general. So as we look at the mentoring aspect of coaching, that is going to help them much longer as they go through life. And not only is it going to help them, then it's going to help them to help maybe their kids, maybe their nephew, maybe some other athletes. So what you're pouring into those athletes is not only helping them, but you're looking at generations down the road. and they can become, you know, a mentor to other individuals. So, what we're doing, and when we're looking at that, it's not only a small window, but it can encompass, it can include generations, and not only people in their family, but other people outside their family. So,
Yeah.
uh, you know, that is the difference. When you're looking at an athlete who's mentor versus one who isn't, where one who isn't just going to wing it, or they're just going to go to whoever's, they're just looking for information, and you don't know if that information is sound, and you don't know if it's going to help them make the right decision. So it's very important.
Yeah, and I'll also add the difference could be when we're looking at this from a student athlete perspective is some quit. Some get into trouble, some go to jail, some decide to start stealing cars, some decide to start smoking weed, some decide to start popping the medications, the oxycodones. Those are the things that's popular. That's what they're listening to. They succumb to peer pressure. They get influenced by people that they shouldn't be. And at the end of the day, it's like we're talking about personal development here, whereas the coach might just be concerned with the season. That's nothing wrong with that. And like you said before, it is a balancing act. But we make the difference because when they're going through a tough spot, they're going to reach out and call. And they're going to reach out and call because we have a relationship with them. We showed that we've cared about them. We love them. But more significantly, we have a relationship with their parents and sometimes even their sports coaches, So that's where this becomes, we help solve problems. But like you said, the information, knowledge, and wisdom, it can go on and pass for generations.
Yeah, and it's not easy. This process is not easy. I have another kid that's easy. He was a freshman point guard starting, well, not starting, but he was a standout freshman point guard. And I see in this kid through 25 years of being involved in athletics, very good athlete. But I also see a kid that's going to have issues with authority. Um, he's going to have issues with the outside situations that sports may bring, girls, popularity contest thing. And as a mentor, I could easily kind of like, call him at hey man, what are you doing? How you doing this? As a mentor, you got to kind of like allow them to make their mistakes in a way, or allow some of the stuff to arise so you can go, hey, remember what I said about that? Well, maybe you might want to adjust it and do this. You don't want to sound too much like a disciplinarian. You gotta allow them to go out there and, I'm not gonna say make mistakes, but yeah, you gotta allow them to make a little bit of mistakes so they can see what the negative side of that could be. Because you can have an athlete that's followed your advice for so long that he becomes dependent on you, and then when it's time for him to make decisions, he may not make the proper decision every single time. And I think, Sean, you may have hit on that when you said, you want your athlete to be the type of individual that when you're not around, they're making the right decisions. And this mentor thing is way more mental than it is than it is physical. Or you're talking more about mental stability than you're talking about stabilizing the body or putting the body in a place where it can produce. This here is this is the mental gymnastics of sports that you have to go through in order to be successful. So I find it fun. You know.
Well, we've been talking about difference between mentor and coach. Coach is a mentor. So, we've been talking about the difference. But earlier I think we mentioned there are some similarities where one, you can't really differentiate between the two, and I just want to mention those. Um, in both cases, they define the roles, which allows the athlete to envision what their goals are and how to achieve them. They're both relationships require trust, respect, open communication, and some flexibility. um, training, education are very necessary on both parts. Uh, you know, um, the mentor. You have to understand what your role is as a mentor, and when you're dealing with the athlete as well, as a coach and dealing with your athlete. And it's best, what we're trying to accomplish best when we understand that return investment on the individual. And hopefully that investment is to make them become a better, not only better athlete, but a better person. We must know what set the stage, set the parameters for our expectations, and how we're going to go about achieving those. But the mission is to meet the both the individual and organizational goals. So whether you're strictly on the coach side or the mentor side, but both of those, coach and mentor, you're meeting the needs of the individual and organizational goals. So as a strength coach, yes, you're concerned about the athlete, but at the same time, you want to develop the athlete to the point where it helps the team. The coach is the same way. Yeah, you care about the athlete. You want to make sure that you're caring with athletes, help them be a better athlete, be a better person for your team as you move forward. So there are differences, but yet there are a lot of similarities. And sometimes when you're looking at it, you can't differentiate between a coach or a mentor, but somebody who can put these things together. Oh man, the possibilities are endless, and the impact is great. So I just hope that someone can really uh, take both aspects, combine them, and not just be strictly on one side or the other, because in the end, it's going to help the athlete and it's going to help the organization as a whole.
The Sports Mastery Workbook was created for the student athlete and the parent to work through together. The Sports Mastery Workbook was created for the student athlete and the coach to work through together. It was created in a sense and in a way to bridge the gap in communication between these parties and build a successful relationship dynamic. To learn more, visit sportsmastery.com/workbook or check out the show notes page and click on the link.